Welcome to the Learning Curve with Castelle, where we dive deep into the world of physical therapy and wellness. I'm your host, Castelle, and today we have a truly special guest joining us, Lori Duncan. Lori is the owner of Duncan Sports Therapy and Wellness in Lafayette, Colorado, and a passionate advocate for preventative physical therapy. With her extensive background in sports and orthopedic rehab, as well as her expertise as a Pilates instructor, Lori has transformed the way people approach movement. So whether you're a physical therapist, occupational therapist, fitness professional, or just someone passionate about movement, today's conversation will inspire you to rethink how we treat and move our bodies. Lori is here to share her insights on everything from the emotional weight of chronic pain to the incredible power of Pilates in rehab. Plus, stay tuned as she talks about her upcoming in-person courses with Summit Professional Education that are designed to optimize functional movement and help us all move better at every stage of life.
So you built your career around optimizing functional movement. Can you share a moment when you saw movement transform a patient's life in a way that they never expected?
Wow, that's a big question because I've been doing this for a while. Thinking about one of my patients. He came in and he had a retracted supraspinatus, so meaning that was so bunched up on one side that they couldn't do surgery on it. And so, his compensation was to do this. And he was like, I don't want to live the rest of my life doing this, but I also don't want to go and just get a total shoulder. So I said, well, there's 4 of those little muscles. And I said, only one is, not in the equation. And I said, so what we can do is we can try to work on the others in order for you to try to get a new rhythm going overhead for your overhead reach, because you don't realize how much you use your arms overhead until you're compensating and you get neck pain or whatever's going on. And after probably 6 to 8 weeks, he was able to reach that thing overhead and have no pain or anything like that. And it was just fun. He was a really good hard worker, but it was really fun to watch him be like, I don't have to get a surgery. I can actually make this work. And I guess his wife will come in now and then. She's like, oh, he is just up there just doing the stuff every day. But that was probably within the last 6 months, somebody that I think he thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this unless I get a total shoulder. And that's just not true.
Yeah. I was reading through the reviews of your website, and major kudos to you because people are taking time to write novels. But that was kind of a sentiment that I gleaned from a lot of them, was this surprise that it could get better. I think a lot of people, and I'm not sure, is that something that you run into frequently with chronic pain patients, where it's just kind of it's bad and I don't know how I'm going to get out of this rut?
I think my philosophy has always been that the body wants to feel the best it can at any age and at any moment. And so if you take that philosophy and think, okay, what can I do? I mean, maybe I can't make you 100%, but if you're sitting at 0% of your function and you have so much pain, maybe we can get you up to 80%. Well, that's a much better functional place to be. I've realized that over the years, most people will start to put themselves into little boxes of okay, well, I'm too old to be doing that or whatever. But really, that's the best thing I can always tell, is that the body will try to heal itself and try to respond if you give it the right intervention.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the box, because previously you've emphasized not putting patients in an old box or any box at all. And so why do you think that the traditional approach to aging and movement is so limiting? And how can PTs in general shift their mindset to help patients move better at every stage of life?
Yeah, I don't know where that started, because it's not just in therapy. And, you see it in doctors. People will come in and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, you're 55 years old now. I'm like, I'll be 50 in May, and I would really like someone not to put me in the old box. I'm not totally sure where it started. I think it's just a big piece I try to talk about when I'm teaching across, for Summit, but I also, for my patients that come in and they'll say, hey, my doctor said, I have arthritis in my hip. And I kind of will say, I'm like, that's a really nice story. Now let's find out if that's actually your pain source, because I could probably go get an x-ray or an image on something in my body. I'm not 20 years old anymore and there would be degeneration, but I don't really have pain in my body. And I think that's where sometimes we see these things on imaging, or there's an aging process that happens, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stop what we're doing. And it doesn't mean that we can't keep, just challenging the system. But also too, the biggest thing is just because you have pain doesn't mean it's because of a degeneration pain or because you're older.
Right, right. And I know too, you also, in that same vein, teach people how to move before they get injured, which is huge. So can you share a story of a time when proactive movement changed the trajectory of someone's health in a powerful way?
Sure. I do see a ton of runners, and just because of where I am outside of Boulder. And I think one of the things about when people will come in is that they come in and they'll have we'll just say hip pain or something, or calf pain. And so, yes, we will treat that and treat the cause. But when they're in there, one of the things I'll start doing is looking at their run and making sure that they are running from the glutes and they have the lean and they have all the different things. And if they're not pumping their arms or whatever. So I try to make that preventive. So I had a guy last year who came in for, just to answer your question, for calf pain, I believe, but he had zero idea where his glutes were and the soleus wasn't working and all these different things. But he started realizing, we started doing this work, and then he would go out and do, Bear Peak or whatever. And he's like, oh my gosh, I can get up at 4 minutes faster because I understand how to move from my body. So I do try to treat the whole system, even if they're not in it just for that particular thing. I don't want them to have back pain. I don't want them to hurt themselves. So, and I tell people that, I'm like, I understand you're here for your calf, but you're going to get a glute exercise. You're going to get some core. You might even get some lats, right? I mean, it really depends, but I really do try to treat the whole system.
Yeah, which is so important. I know me personally, I ripped my calf one time from running and not warming up properly. And so I've had to learn that lesson the hard way. But I also know that for you, as both a PT and a Pilates instructor, you get to see movement from multiple angles. So how has blending these disciplines changed the way that you treat and connect with your patients?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing that I realize what Pilates does is that it really emphasizes movement based from our core system, which is not just our deep abdominals, but it also emphasizes a stability that we need in our system and not just strength or mobility. Pilates is really a stability with mobility thing, but it has this emphasis on stability that doesn't really exist in many other places in the world. And so when I start teaching people how to move with this stability, they're like, whoa, that feels totally different. I know exactly where my body's going to go. And when people have stability, they have more strength. I mean, so that's, I guess, the biggest thing about blending it is being able to teach people how to move with purpose.
Which is so, because that's not something that a lot of people think they don't know how to do. I'm fully aware I don't know how to make a souffle. I'm aware of that. I don't think it would ever cross my mind that I don't really know how to move my body, because you just don't think about something like that.
We're not taught it very well. I mean, I've always said maybe in my retirement, I'd love to go and teach kids how to lift their back from the floor, right? Because if you learn it from a really young age, you keep it. It's the stuff that we're learning later in life that we're like, well, at 40 years old, why didn't I learn that? I'm like, exactly. Why didn't we learn that? None of us learned it. So again, that goes back to the prevention piece where if somebody comes in, it's back pain or whatever. I'm like, hold on, let's make sure you understand all of this moving forward, the stability, the mobility that you need in order for you to be moving safely through the space of the world.
Yeah. Well, and just if you look at young children too, when they bend down to pick something up, it's all legs. When they are on their back breathing, it's all diaphragm first. So in many ways, it almost feels like we end up learning that that kind of erase the natural way that our bodies are designed to move. And I'm not sure at what age it is that you start bending over to pick things up. But I think what you said is really important.
It is true. As children, we learn this from a very natural standpoint. We learn how to be stable. And then we learn how to move with stability and mobility. And you're right. And then we end up compensating as adults. And we're not. So like if a baby doesn't learn stability, right? If they're sitting there and they haven't learned how to control their trunk and they try to reach for something, those will fall down. Well, we're not falling down anymore, but we are compensating. And that's why we have all these different kinds of pain, because we're not really moving from this place of a stable system.
Right. And now you talk about the triad of strength, stability, and mobility. What's the common mistake PTs make when addressing these areas, and how can they rethink their approach for a better result?
I think the biggest, and this is not obviously everywhere, but the biggest thing when people come to see me, if I'm their third or fourth physical therapist, is in general, PTs will start with mobility or they will start with strength. And they kind of forget this bridge in the middle of this stability. And that's where I start. Because if you have stability, then you can move and be mobile. And if you have stability, then you can add and load on the strength. So that's been the biggest thing. So when people come to see me, they're like, I've never done any movements like this. They feel good, but this feels a very different approach because your movement shouldn't hurt. And a lot of times, like if somebody has knee pain, one of the first exercises, I'm going to say the triad that people give is bridging, lunges, and squats. And if you don't understand where your glutes are and how to stabilize your pelvis, it's painful. So then they don't think PT works. And that's not true. So you have to, I usually get people off the ground and I'm like, let's figure out how these prime up. And then we can load into a glute bridge and a squat. But lunges are one of the last things I actually will give someone with a knee pain. They have to have some pretty amazing glute and VMO activity in order for that to go really well for them.
That makes sense. And all of those movements, they seem so simple, but like you said, if you're not starting from the right foundation, you're hard and you risk re-injury.
Yeah. I'm not sure where that, I don't remember learning that in school that we, start with all those things, but I do think sometimes too, if somebody has knee pain and they're a runner, they always say, oh, I want something to do. Well, that's, again, a really nice story, but let's start with what you actually need, and then we'll work up to that so it doesn't hurt.
Right. I also liked what you mentioned about like the idea of PT working or PT not working. So many patients come to PT expecting physical treatment, but end up finding emotional or mental too. So how do you see movement as a form of healing beyond just the physicality of it?
Well, I always tell people all therapy is the same. And physical therapy is where we should be. Reprogramming loops that are in the brain for motor patterning, right? Because what's happening down here has been altered up the stairs. And so when you do that, if you know that you're rerouting that and you're giving this healthy, these healthy movements back to the system, you also are changing the neuroscience that's happened when you've had pain, because acute pain goes to a different place in our brain called the thalamus. Like if I pinch myself, it just goes boop. We process it. It's like, okay, let's not pinch me again. But chronic pain gets looped into our limbic system. And it can be a little messy over the years, but we do know from research that it's movement, healthy movement gets you out of that mental chronic pain space more than any other thing. Movement.
And I know that myofascial, wait, am I saying this right? Myofascial?
Yeah.
Myofascial. And it's perfect. It's 10. I know that myofascial pain can be so isolating and frustrating for patients. So what's one of the most emotional or eye-opening experiences you've had when helping someone break free from being in chronic pain?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I'm probably going to talk about a patient that I had, probably almost 18 years ago. The thing about myofascial pain is it doesn't show up on an image. There's not a test. You don't have an autoimmune disorder. You don't really have anything wrong. So by the time you've come maybe to see a physical therapist, you've been having chronic pain. It could be months, sometimes even years. You may be on a pain management system of some sort. And it's very frustrating because nobody can tell you have pain, right? You have to believe your patient, they have pain. Nobody can validate. That's a really hard space to be in. So I had a patient years ago, and she had fallen years ago hiking and had really hurt her pelvis, fractured it, had gangrene of her glute. I mean, it was a mess. And by the time I'm seeing her, I think it's maybe 15 years after her injury, and she was on a fentanyl patch. This is a long time ago. And I remember like touching her and just even her skin, because, skin even has fascia in it. And just touching her skin was just like, because her threshold was so low. And so it was really interesting. We just got into the warm therapy pool at the time, and we just kind of hang, and we just started talking and be like, are you in pain? No, I'm not. I said, okay, tell your brain this feels good. So you can start trusting it again, because it becomes a non-trust. You're not trusting the doctors, right? Nobody's validating it. And then you start to think that your body's rejecting you. And so it's sort of like, well, who do I trust here? I just have pain. What am I going to do? So for her, it was really magical to see her. She had weaned off fentanyl while we were together, which is just so hard. And she was able to go hike in the Andes Mountains. I think it was like 9 months later. So it was a really amazing story. I mean, she had you could tell she didn't want to be in pain, and she didn't want to feel this way, and she didn't want to be on fentanyl. So she definitely had more of a gumption behind her about it, but I will never forget her story.
That's amazing. That is so powerful. So right now, it's very much so a trend on social media, this concept of pink Pilates princess core, where Pilates and moving your body in a certain way has become somewhat of a status symbol, whether it's incredibly expensive gym memberships or Pilates classes that are like 100 plus a pop. It has kind of been seen as like, I can afford this and you can't. And it has almost, I would say, gotten away a little bit from its initial roots, which is healing people and helping people of all bodies. So do you see any of this on your end? And what would you have to say to someone as a Pilates instructor yourself, who maybe feels intimidated to join a class because they're like, I don't look like anyone in this class, or I am going to feel like I'm totally out of my depth here. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you're right. Like if you go on some social media things, there is a lot of very thin, lean, beautiful women showing these things, right? Which is great. That's a space that can exist over there all the way. But I agree with you. I think it has a greater meaning than that. And I always tell people this was invented by a man. Like this was not originally this Joseph Pilates was a very creative man who was a very sick child who came up with all these different movements. And he was always looking at ways for you to move. And if you go online and you look at some of his pictures, I mean, he looks pretty amazing for his age, but he's not a thin, do you know what I mean? So I used to work in a gym. I used to teach Pilates, mat Pilates in a gym. And I do remember, I think the biggest thing is I would always point out, if you really watch someone move, no matter the size or the shape, good movement looks good. And so I try to always tell my patients that. So if they're in my clinic and they're doing on the reformer and they're self-conscious or whatever, that's fine. But I'm like, listen, that looks really good. And sometimes I'll even take a video for them and I'll show them. And I'm like, do you see that? That looks beautiful. So I think some of it's just changing how we talk about it. And really, that's the biggest thing I can say is when movement is healthy and right, it looks beautiful in anybody.
Right. And also bodies go through trends like we see on social media, but it is just that. It is just social media. Whereas, 10 years ago, it was the era of the BBL, and now celebrities are having those removed. Really going back to almost like the Kate Moss era style But that does not change the reality that for actual humans, actual bodies, your body is not a trend. And so I love what you said about the movement looking beautiful when it is well done. Because I think that after you take a class like that, it stays with you throughout the day. So you see those kind of gains that it's not about fitting one body type, which is going to change in 10 years anyways, to like what's considered the most beautiful, but that movement and feeling beautiful in your body, whatever that may be, I think is just really.
Yes. And I think you just said that very well. It's about feeling strong and stable and confident in your own body and what it can do. And you said it. We have gotten in this world like, oh, we should all look like this when we move. And that's just not true. Everybody has a very different body type. Everyone has a different history. And we need to start celebrating that and honoring that.
Yeah. And now, where can we find you next? Where's your next?
I am going to outside of San Francisco. I think it's called Concord, California. So I'll be doing all my 4 classes in Concord.
Love it. And which 4 classes are those?
The first one is the 6-hour course, which is strengthening core stability. And then the one in the evening is optimizing functional movement. It goes through 4 main functional movements that we should all have in our system. Again, going back to every body should have this. The next morning is the myofascial, treating myofascial pain. And then in the afternoon, it's kind of putting it all together. It's my strength class or strength and mobility class. And it becomes this more of a interactive class. They become the patients to an extent, right? And we look at, okay, well, this person has ankle pain and this person has ankle pain. Those are different kinds of ankle pains, and look at the difference in these exercises or movements and look at the difference in these. And that's why we can't be giving people a sheet that says, oh, you have an ankle sprain, do these exercises.
Right. Now, I know that you're such a respected lecturer, educator, and we're so lucky to have you at Summit. But I know that a huge component of that is also being a student yourself. So has there been a moment when a student or a fellow PT or OT said something that changes the way that you see movement or patient care?
Okay, I am probably going to say this was years ago, maybe 8 years ago, and I was teaching for Summit because I've been teaching with Summit for 10 years. And one patient or a participant came up to me and she was a PTA. And here I am teaching my core strengthening course, right? And she goes, so I work for a physical therapist who doesn't believe in the core. And I went, what? And she's like, yeah, he doesn't believe in it. I said, well, okay, give me an example. Give me an example. Somebody comes with in low back pain or something like that. Like you're not treating the core. And she goes, yeah, we just do like pelvic tilt and some bridging and some stretching. And I think that's when I was like, oh, wow, there is some really uneducated. I mean, I always tell people I didn't make up the body. I didn't make up science. I didn't make up anatomy. It is what it is. So I'm not sure why people make up stuff all the time, right? There's methods, there's this, there's that. And I'm very, I guess, kind of nerdy. I mean, about the body. I love anatomy. I love physiology. And I really try to respect how our body was put together. So that is something that I will never forget. Like, oh, there's people out there that don't think that we move from a central core stability system. And I thought, and she was like, so what do I do? I said, find a different job. I mean, if you want to learn, she was new. She was probably only a year out. And I said, I couldn't work with someone that didn't respect the anatomy of the body.
Right. Now, I'm sure you encounter the following maybe a little bit more on the patient side, but I know that we are all living in an age where it's just constant information overload. And the consumer is left trying to decipher what to believe in, who to believe in, to what extent, how line and sinker am I supposed to believe this person? And so I think that could be really misleading for someone, a patient, to go to a care provider. And you're also just kind of a little bit designed to be like, okay, they're an expert, they know everything, I should just follow along. So could you maybe give like an example or some insight on how to make sure that as care providers you are operating from a place of expertise is the wrong word, but you're operating from a place of know-how that can leave your patients feeling confident that they are getting the right information when they go home and they're faced with, some video on Meta that says maybe the opposite or something wrong or shows them how to do a squat in a weird way.
Wow, I mean that's there's a lot to that question. I think the biggest thing I always tell people is movement shouldn't hurt, especially when you're in therapy. Like your movement should feel like it's medicine to your system. That's one of the things I'm always like, this should feel good. This should feel kind of like, oh, that feels important. That doesn't hurt. I also think the healthcare world in general can talk down to people. I don't think everyone does this, but I do think in general, people are talked down to. That's the best way I can say it. And so then they start to lose their confidence. So I tell them, even when I call it playtime. I'm like, let's figure out what exercises work for you. And we usually give about 5 to 6 exercises, movements, however you want to think about it, that are specific to them. But I'm like, if that doesn't feel good, there's 100 ways to do this. Let's figure that out and try something else that works for you. And so I think that you have to start giving people back the power. They know their body's still the best. They are living in their body all the time. So if you are, as a healthcare provider, can just say, does that feel important? Does that feel like it's going to meet your system right now? And sometimes they're like, you know what, Lori, I just don't like this. Great. Move on. I do not make somebody do something they don't want to do.
I love that so much because I have definitely had to change some personal trainers in the past who were very dead set on we're doing these exercises, we're doing them this order, and you're sitting there as like the recipient up here, like, well, I don't want to complain. I don't want it to seem like lazy. But what you said is so important. The body knows what feels good. And there's so many alternatives. So just having that humility to be able to hear your patient out has got to be so life-changing for them because I'm sure a lot of people no matter the discipline are still coming into contact with, like you said, the healthcare providers that are kind of talking down to them. Like, we know better than you, even though they're not living in your.
Correct. It's a weird thing. Like, I don't know, you would never go to a mental health therapist and they would say, well, maybe you would. I don't know. I'm not a mental health therapist. But if you came in with depression or something and they were just like, well, maybe you don't. Maybe this is what you have. Right? That would really probably never happen, or you would never go back to that mental health. So if somebody comes in and they're like, I have this shoulder pain. Well, I don't know. I think it's really your neck. Okay. I mean, it could be. I'm not saying not, but I just don't think we listen sometimes the best in healthcare. That's all. And listening to me is 80%. They tell me 80% of their story, listening to them. And then I watch them move.
Right. And I think there's another alternative that's even more dangerous to someone coming in and maybe even being so far as to be misdiagnosed. But I know for me personally, before they found out that I was autistic, they told me I was bipolar. And I couldn't. And I'm sure it is not very hard when you are in chronic pain to go see a provider and they tell you something like, oh, I don't really think it's your shoulder. And you say, okay, well, you're the expert, and you internalize that and go along with it because maybe as a patient, you don't have whatever, I don't know, gumption or in you to say, no, expert, I think you're wrong. This is what my body is telling. And so I think what you said about listening is can really change people's lives in making sure that they get the correct care for everything that's happening with them.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes people will say, I really think it's my shoulder. And maybe I find something in their neck just to kind of give that example. And I'm like, well, let's just give something for both of them right now. Like, let's, calm this down, but, let's make sure we're addressing this other area that seems to have some other signs and symptoms with it. But Yeah, I mean, to not trust your patient that they're telling you what's going on in their body. I mean, you as an example, like I can't imagine having a diagnosis of bipolar and then somebody being like, oh, shoot, nope, we were wrong. It's actually autism. Like, what is that? That's just not that's not listening to the patient.
Right. And I think that there has to be some sort of a dance, some sort of a give and take between the patient and their ability to advocate for themselves. And it sounds like what you are able to do as a provider is who does have the philosophy that listening is 80% of it, is to empower your patient to self advocate. Because I think a lot of people, I mean, even just going through school, the person standing at the top of the room is right. And you're the one that's here to listen and absorb what they have to say. And so just giving your patients the tool to speak up for themselves and be in an environment where they feel that they won't be ridiculed or they will be taken seriously. I mean, it makes sense that that's where all of your glowing reviews come from and where you get all these life-changing stories because I really do think that it is somewhat of a dance between provider and patient.
Absolutely. And it's a relationship. And that's that's a very insightful thing you just said. And I think in traditional healthcare, you're right. It's this person who's the therapist, the doctor, the whatever provider that is the expert. And then it's the patient. Well, no, I'm looking for that relationship with you. I mean, I go by Lori. I don't use any titles. Like, we laugh all the time. I laugh all day long with my patients because laughter, going back to your mental health release, is really good. I'm like, sometimes people will do something like, what is that? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, let's fix it because I don't like it. But I mean, just having some levity, that's probably the thing. I try to bring some levity to healing because we can make this very strict and very serious and very impersonal. And if you make it fun and personal, people are much more motivated and they heal better.
Right. And I think too, anyone who is dealing with chronic pain, you're also kind of dealing with this like betrayal of self, betrayal of the body, of like, I don't want to feel bad every day when I wake up. And to have that kind of agency taken away from you, the ability to feel good, is just puts people in kind of a vulnerable state. So I think that levity is not frou-frou. It's not just for kicks. I think it is so integral and important to healing. And I think, maybe in the past that may have come across as like a little woo-woo or something. But I think that there's real meat to what you said in terms of helping people heal.
We've really become pretty serious about this whole healing thing. And I don't totally know why, but you're right. Like, I want someone to know that you can feel better. If you want to feel better, you can feel better. You're going to have to work for it. I'm not putting a hot pack on you. I'm not doing ultrasound. I'm not doing E-stim. You're going to actually have to move. You're going to have to work for it a little bit in your body. And it's going to take some thinking. And it's going to take some time. But if you can take charge of your body again in a healthy way, isn't that worth it?
Totally. So now, if every PT listening today could walk away with just one insight that would change their career, change the trajectory for their patients, what's something you would share with?
I would make sure you're really listening without bias. And don't forget to add in stability. That would probably be my thing.
Huge thanks to Lori Duncan for sharing her wealth of knowledge with us. That wraps up today's episode of The Learning Curve with Castelle. If you're looking to deepen your understanding of core stability, mobility, and functional movement, don't miss out on Lori's upcoming workshops in Concord, California, and beyond. You can learn more about her transformative approach to rehabilitation, strength, and stability by visiting Summit Professional Education. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. We will catch you on the next episode. Until then, keep moving, keep learning, and remember, there's always a new curve to master. Take care.